it's no secret to members of this audience that Jewish-run influence operations and political sabotage networks with direct links to the state of Israel have infiltrated and occupied the United States government. AIPAC is the single largest financial funder of America's Congress and of America's political class. And it functions with the sole mission of advancing Israeli interests in the United States, of making sure that America stands ready to do whatever Israel says. But you see, these political influence operations, these subversive networks that span the entire world and trace their roots back to Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, are only just a part of the equation, because this subversion isn't limited to campaign contributions and political theater. It's society-wide. It's deeply psychological, and it's designed to inundate everything with the worship of Jews. It's a religious sacrament at this point. Israel worship. And with claims that anyone who doesn't like that, or who questions it, or God forbid, criticizes that, you're an anti-Semite. You might as well just be Hitler. If you turn on the TV and you're watching one of the corporate networks like the Fox News channel, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to see a commercial about how anti-Semitism is the biggest issue, the biggest threat facing humanity. And it must be stamped out. Think back to the Super Bowl. There was a commercial which lasted actually several minutes. And it's all about this imaginary scourge of anti-Semitism and how one day, for just no reason at all, people just woke up and decided, I hate Jews. I mean, obviously, that's a complete and total hoax. These people are running damage control because over the past year, the world has just actually started seeing Israel for what it is. People are believing what they're actually seeing. They're independently thinking, they're critically thinking, they've started asking questions, they've started to push back on this country's unwavering support of a nation state that's slaughtering women, slaughtering children by the tens of thousands. And one of the more prominent groups behind all of this damage control, behind all of these psyops, is called the Combat Hate Movement. This group has a subsidiary called the Combat Antisemitism Movement, and together they all work to advance the interests of Israel by calling Americans hateful or anti-Semitic and then threatening to combat them. So this group and others like it, they present themselves as this grassroots nonprofit made up of concerned citizens, concerned voters, people who really want to make sure that this country doesn't go off the rails. But in reality, these are the very same people driving this country off the rails. Our friend David Miller has recently reported on this. As many of you may already know, David is a British university professor who was fired for questioning Israel, for questioning Zionism, and who then won a landmark court case in which the right to question these monsters was actually codified as a form of free speech. But obviously, David didn't stop there. He's been looking into Israel. He's been looking into the influence operations that they're running worldwide, and just recently, he authored a report on this combat hate, combat anti-Semitism movement. And what they found was directly linked to the Israeli regime. This so-called movement is an Israeli government operation that's meant to intimidate and manipulate Americans and funnel money to Jewish subversives and their pleasure groups and their pressure groups. David reported that, quote, during a 2021 controversy about the combat anti-Semitism movement, the Forward reported that it functioned as a dark money front group for the Kansas oil billionaire Adam Barron. But this revelation only gets us so far. Palestine Declassified revealed that the Combat Hate Foundation is part of a joint venture run by the Israeli regime. The Ministry of Diaspora Affairs in charge. The joint venture is run via the ministry's deniable corporate intermediary voices of Israel, though there is no mention of this relationship on the website of the Combat Anti-Semitism Movement, end quote. So David revealed that a Jewish propaganda network called Voices of Israel is working in direct concert with the Combat Hate Foundation, with Voices of Israel bragging on its website that, quote, Voices of Israel has a joint venture agreement with the State of Israel led by the Ministry of Diaspora Affairs and Combat Antisemitism, end quote. So what it comes down to is this. The fact that Israeli government, which is funded by America, by the American taxpayer, by you, is sending its agents to the United States for malign purposes. And the odds are that this is just one of dozens, if not hundreds of programs exactly like it in America and England and other places as well. So for more on all of this, we're now joined again by David Miller. So right out in the wide open, David, they're just showing us, yep, we have these agents here that are meant to pull off a psyop on the American people, and the American people are funding this psyop so they could just believe more of this nonsense.
Well, that's right. You said dozens and dozens across the world, but there's dozens and dozens in the US itself. This is only one of a number of other similar operations. And in fact, the network which I have revealed here, the Combat Antisemitism Movement, is a network which is itself 850 separate organizations all around the world, many of them in the US, most of them in the US, but all around the world. And this is an attempt to subvert the politics of the US. You said that the money goes from the US to Israel and it comes back via these organizations. Well, that's true. But what you're also seeing, of course, is that the money comes back in a disguised way. It goes via this thing called Voices of Israel. It used to be called Consort, and it's a deniable company which is set up as a public benefit company on behalf of the Israeli government. And the reason that they've done that they've sent the money through Voices of Israel is so that it can evade the law in the US. If it didn't go through Voices of Israel, all of the organizations which took the money would have to register as foreign agents under the Foreign Agents Registration Act, which actually, of course, you'll know was set up in 1938 to combat Nazi money influencing US politics. So you've got a bizarre situation here where there are hundreds and hundreds of organizations being marshaled by this particular operation, and their aim is simply to subvert the possibility that Americans could take sensible decisions on foreign policy and indeed on some domestic policies.
So at what point does somebody like AIPAC or Voices of Israel actually become required to register as a federal agent, or excuse me, a foreign agent? Why is, for example, why would AIPAC not be declared an enemy combatant? I mean, these people directly interfere and meddle in our elections and directly sway the outcome. I think that the most honest way to say it is this. The American political apparatus is the entertainment arm of the military-industrial complex. It's all fake because it's all controlled by Israel.
Well, I mean, what we see is that there's been a 50-year campaign by the Zionist movement, and in particular led by AIPAC and its previous incarnations, to evade the Foreign Agents Registration Act, and they've done that quite successfully. There are some elements of the Israeli government who register under the Foreign Agents Registration Act, but there are others which don't. I mean, the AIPAC is one, but there's another one called the Jewish National Fund, which is engaged in sending money to steal land from the Palestinians in occupied Palestine. It fought a long battle to be against registration. It's not registered. In Canada, just the other day, I noticed that the courts took a decision that the Jewish National Fund in Canada has to be closed down because not only was it sending money to steal Palestinians' homes and land, it was also secretly sending money directly to the occupation forces, the IDF. So what we're seeing here is that this is not just that they're evading the law, the Foreign Agents Registration Act, but they're actually directly engaged in the genocide in Palestine.
So the American taxpayer, it's not an overstatement. It's not being hyperbolic to say they're having their money stolen from them. They're unwillingly giving this money up to go and kill kids, drop bombs on them, displace them, steal their land, force this migration, force this intentional religious clash to build the prevalence of anti-Semitism so that that can be combated, which means that they're bringing the war directly to your home front because they're telling you that they're going to crush you while they take all of your money on your way to the grave.
That's right. And American citizens are paying for that to be done to them. That's the most extraordinary thing. American citizens are paying to be lied to and to cover up the whole the role of the money in the genocide. So when you look at this organization, Combat Anti-Semitism, and its foundation, the Combat Hate Foundation, and it's as you said, it's run by this guy called Adam Barron, comes from this Wichita oil family, and they've been funding Zionist causes for a long, long time. Now, one of the other things that they do, they have a whole series of other non-profits who do philanthropy, by which they mean giving money directly to the IDF. They indeed, the Adam Barron's father, who's now dead, Robert Barron, his name is given to several yeshivas, which are religious institutions built on occupied territory in the West Bank, and they're called Hesder yeshivas. Now, the point of a Hesder yeshiva is to bring ultra-Orthodox Jews into military training for the IDF. So it's a way to break down the residual elements of anti-Zionism within some aspects of the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community in Israel and indeed in the US. So there's a lot of very, very awful stuff going on in these organizations, but they are the money which they put in to the Combat Anti-Semitism movement is used together with money from the Ministry of Diaspora Affairs, and they then offer up contracts to do propaganda work to present the idea that anti-Semitism is prevalent in the US when it's not. And the government, the Israeli government and Combat Anti-Semitism will pay half the money, and other philanthropists, other Zionist family foundations will pay the other half. So it's a way to disguise the money and to leverage the money which the Israeli government itself is putting in.
So it's interesting because you said, yeah, they're paying for it. Not only is it interesting that the American people are paying for it, but they're paying for it and then they're cheering it on. They're paying for it and they're supporting it, and then they're turning on their fellow Americans who would question it. They're literally going for the jugular. They'll rip your throat out if you question it or, God forbid, criticize it. And this is just like climate change, right? It's just a never-ending, unachievable benchmark for success. You could never end climate change. It's like systemic racism in America. It's non-existent. It doesn't, there's no such thing as systemic racism. There's also no such thing as anti-Semitism, but it's this boogeyman that will forever be there where the goalposts can continue to move until you're just suffocated and crushed, and you'll cheer it on as you go to your own proverbial digital, financial, virtual, or physical prison camp.
Well, my view is slightly different to that. I mean, I think that there is systemic racism, and the Zionist movement is one of the key elements of fostering systemic racism, especially against...
Who's racist against who, systemically?
The Zionists are racist against Palestinians, Muslims, and indeed against Christians. And so you actually have the encouragement by the Zionist movement. Zionism is inherently a racist ideology. It has to condemn Muslims, it has to condemn Palestinians and Arabs and say that they're not human in order that they can steal their land, in order they can pretend that they are in some way superior or chosen, as some of them like to say, and that gives them a superior right to the land of what they call Israel, which of course is occupied Palestine.
Do you think a lot of these evangelical Protestant so-called pastors actually believe the nonsense that they're spewing?
Well, I think that's an interesting question, because it's not clear to me that some of the ultra-Orthodox Jews can possibly believe the stuff that they believe. But the problem is, for the Christian Zionists and the Jewish Zionists, is that they have different views. One is that the Jewish Zionists believe that come the glorious moment when God returns, that all the Christians will either be killed or will become slaves of the Jews. And the Christians apparently believe that come the glorious moment that the Jews will be killed or will be slaves of the Christians. So they clearly don't like each other at a rather deep level, but that's what they say that they believe. And of course, if it ever happened, then one of them's not going to end up very well out in the deal.
How can anybody believe that this is the Israel of the Bible? I mean, this is a nation state that was, just these arbitrary borders were drawn on a map on May 14th, 1948. What's going on?
Well, this is about a greater Israel. I mean, this is what they want. I mean, there are those who say, "Oh well, we'll make peace with the Palestinians," but those voices in Israeli society are very, very marginal now. And actually, what you see here is that they want to create a greater Israel. They want to, yes, invade and occupy Lebanon and take over Gaza and the West Bank, but they also want Syria and Iraq and even part of Turkey, Jordan, part of Egypt, and they want to have a massively expanded Jewish colony, and they want to have collaborations with friendly Arab states like the United Arab Emirates and the Saudis, and they will have an empire. That's what they want to do.
How expanded? How expanded? What's the goal here? When will they have succeeded?
Well, they want to be an empire. They want to control the whole world, but they want to do it through the mechanism of a power base in what's called the Middle East by having a greater Israel. That's the purpose.
There's just no final finish line. There's no what does control look like? What does the empire that controls the world look like? Because from where I sit, it looks like they already have succeeded.
Well, I mean, this is true. Look, it's extraordinary, but it's not just that there's the Israel lobby, who you mentioned AIPAC. There are similar organizations in many other countries, especially Western countries, and they are influential in the political system. That's right. But the problem with Zionism is that it's threaded throughout the whole society. You made a similar point earlier, and that means that whenever the Zionists come calling, that the people high up in the legal system or the financial sector or the cultural industries, well, they will do their duty. They will take several decisions in favor of Zionist interests, and that's the way in which this operates. And people talk about this as being occupied. Well, I'm not sure occupied is the correct term, but it certainly is the case that their power extends much further than just via the question of the lobby. And we see that with the huge sums of money which they're sending on a daily basis to occupy Palestine, to fund the illegal settlements and to fund the genocide in Gaza. And that's in plain sight. The Friends of the Israel Defense Forces is a US-based organization. They have massive gala dinners. They have killers from the IDF speaking, and they raise millions and millions of dollars every year. Some of the highest leaders of the entertainment industry are involved. So it's in plain sight, but it's all the way through the society. So I agree with you to that extent.
But it just seems like they just won't stop.
Well, they won't stop. They're in favor of running all of what they will call Greater Israel, and that will make them an imperialist power. And they'll what they want is then, of course, to defeat Russia and China, to destroy Iran and any other state which gets in their way.
They're just going to keep killing kids, aren't they, David?
Well, they are going to do that until they're stopped. I mean, I'm sorry to say that there's no way of stopping them killing children unless they are themselves stopped. There's not the ICJ.
Is the secular nation state of Israel and those arbitrary borders over there that was just plopped in the Middle East, is that the front lines for the military-industrial complex, the American war empire?
I think it is. I mean, and it's also the front lines for the opposition forces. I mean, in that region, the axis of resistance with Hezbollah, the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Islamic resistance in Iraq, of course, the Houthis in Yemen. That's the front line against.
I've just got a couple of seconds left. What about Ukraine? Isn't that kind of the Israel 2.0?
It could be, but it's looking like some of the key Likudniks in the new Trump administration will try and shut down Ukraine. Some of them,
but not Israel. But not Israel. These people are going to prop up. There will not be a greater Israel puppet than Donald Trump. And I'm afraid that people are on autopilot now because they're like, oh my God, Donald Trump's been elected again. We've got 4 years of peace coming back. David Miller, thank you so much. We really appreciate you being here. I would caution you, please be careful about that. No, this is the man that will usher in the one world governance that is controlled by those powers on Rothschild Boulevard in Tel Aviv. More of the Stu Peters Show continues next.